All righty. Good morning, everybody. I am John Vilas, your state senator for the 2nd Hampden and Hampshire District, and welcome to the next episode of From Beacon Hill to the 413. Just a brief reminder about the genesis of this show and why we're doing this. One of the things that I noticed very early into my career as an elected official is that there is a sense from a lot of folks throughout the Commonwealth and beyond that they really don't have a good insight, if you will, into things that are happening at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. And it has nothing to do with them and has everything to do, I think anyway, with elected officials not doing a good enough job kind of conveying what they're up to, issues that are going on. So Beacon Hill to the 413 is all about literally that, bringing what's happening in Boston at the state capitol on Beacon Hill back to the communities that I represent, that I'm very proud to represent. And we always try to bring in people from the community that are in the news, newsmakers, and people that have a good grasp of things that are going on Beacon Hill. We are incredibly fortunate and lucky with our guest today. My guest today, I'm happy to announce, proud to announce, is Major General Gary Keefe, the Adjutant General of the Massachusetts National Guard. I'm going to give you a brief background, and I'm going to read from this like I traditionally do because I don't want to mess anything up. And then we'll welcome our guests. So General Keefe, he oversees the strategic direction, administration, and operation of the Massachusetts National Guard with an annual budget of $450 million to ensure over 9,000 joint soldiers, airmen, and civilians are trained, equipped, and mission ready to support national security objectives overseas, as well as protect life and property and preserve peace, order, and public safety as directed in times of natural disaster and civil emergency within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Major Keefe first received his commission in 1986 through ROTC at Norwich University. After 6 years of active duty service, he joins the Massachusetts Air National Guard with the 104th Fighter Wing as an active Guard reservist. He has moved up the ranks ever since and held numerous positions, including serving as the Expeditionary Logistics Group Commander overseas during Operation Allied Force, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. On January 28, 2016, he was promoted to the rank of Major General. General Keefe is highly decorated, having received the Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, and the Meritorious Service Medal, as well as many others. In addition to this, he currently serves as the chairman of the Holyoke Soldiers Home Board of Trustees, a position that he has held since 2021. General Keefe, welcome.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure to kind of stay here in Western Mass and just kind of get caught up. And I do watch the show, and it's very informative, and I appreciate you taking the time to kind of not just do the show, but talk to me about what the Guard does and what we're doing here in Massachusetts.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a critical role that you folks play throughout the Commonwealth and really beyond. And I've said this to you before, but one of the coolest experiences I had was back in 2012 when I was in Afghanistan as an Army reservist who was deployed with, at the time, the 3rd Infantry Division. And I was at FOB Apache in Zabul Province, Afghanistan, and I was just I don't even know what I was doing. I was waiting for somebody, and I saw a bunch of fellow soldiers building part of the base. Conversation ensued, and it was members of the Massachusetts National Guard. So that was really, really cool, and it gave me a little slice of home, if you will, talking about mutual interests.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. You know, we run into each other all over the place. When I did Iraqi Freedom, RC-130 landed and the tail dropped, and there's 2 guys just on this remote base, and there were 2 of our guys from the Massachusetts Air National Guard that I had no idea were even going to be there. So
it's amazing.
It's
amazing.
It is.
Sir, I want to start kind of at the beginning because one of the things, and we'll talk about the SPEED Act, I think that we'll both agree, the monumental legislation we passed this last session, really only about a month ago, it was signed. But really just kind of start at the basic level because one of the things we've certainly talked about, and I've had this conversation with others, sometimes there is this, this misperception that the active duty component, the United States Reserve, the Army Reserves or whatever, that's the Reserve Corps in general, and the National Guard are the same. And I think, and a lot of times we use those phrases interchangeably. Can you just kind of give a broad distinction or definition for the viewers?
Sure. So the active duty component, be it the Army or the Air, Title 10, regular Army, regular Air Force, they're focused to fight and win the nation's wars. Living on active duty bases throughout the country. As you know, we do not have a large active duty footprint throughout New England. We kind of lost a lot of our active duty bases as early as 1972, and we kind of never regained them. The reserve component, Army Reserve, Air Reserve, Title 10 Reserve component. On the Army side, Focus really does a great job in medical type of capacity, and they've got some really interesting military occupational specialties. Different things, but important things on the logistical side. Boat captain, train engineer, and their main focus is to be ready to kind of provide that base operating support to the active duty component. The Guard is unique in the fact that it has two missions, two chains of command, right? So active duty Army and Air and Reserve component, Army and Air, their chain of command is through the President of the United States. The National Guard, we have two. Day to day, our chain of command is the governor of the Commonwealth. But what we're funded at and what we need to always focus on is our Title 10 mission, and that is to respond and help fight and win the nation's wars. So day to day, as you and I have spoken a bunch of times throughout COVID and winter storms and tornadoes, gas explosions, the National Guard is the only component that the governor can call up, put on state active duty, and allow them to respond to domestic emergencies, either man-made or natural. At the same time, we're training every day to send our soldiers overseas and fight and win the nation's wars. And our two air wings, the 104th Fighter Wing here in Westfield and the 102nd Intelligence Wing out on the Cape, they're doing the same thing, but they are actually performing day-to-day Title 10 missions. I know this week, in the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot of flying. The 104th Fighter Wing has picked up what's called the Noble Eagle mission, and their job is anytime the president now moves, they're in the air and escorting the president, as well as ramping up that alert capacity. So really what it comes down to is the Guard is the only component that the governor can call up, and we can make sure that we're taking care of the citizens of the Commonwealth. So that's kind of the difference.
And if you look at just COVID, let's just start there for a second. Myself and so many of my colleagues, and I think it's safe to say so many people who are going to listen to this and watch this, driving buses because there was a workforce shortage for bus drivers, the Holyoke Soldiers Home. There were so many mission sets that someone at home might not traditionally associate with what someone in uniform might do.
Right.
But the Guard stepped up on a daily basis. That call came in, you folks went, and then in the summer of 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, when we had a lot of civil unrest throughout the Commonwealth and beyond, the Guard deployed there as well to kind of help out law enforcement, right? And those instances.
Yeah, it's as you mentioned, it's been a very tasking, trying couple years for the entire nation, not just us in the Guard. But you're right. We spent, as soon as we found out and were asked to kind of see what we could do to help out the Soldiers Home, we sent a team in there. And we had, I think at one time we hit a high of 136 soldiers and airmen that were in there. And they stayed there for about 6 months till things had settled down. When it came to some of the civil unrest after the George Floyd death, Massachusetts is the only state whose National Guard actually allows our military policemen and our security forces airmen, when we're put on state active duty, allows them to actually have full law enforcement authority equal to a state trooper. So that's a huge help, not just in cases of emergency, but just in cases of normal day-to-day events, that when you need to augment a security force because you want to make sure that you're protecting the populace that's attending these events. But yeah, we're the only state that actually has that, to the best of my knowledge. And when I became the Adjutant General in 2016, I constantly bragged about that, and
rightfully so.
And the question I always got back from from a lot of my counterparts, especially, the southern states, is Massachusetts lets you guys do that? Yeah, Massachusetts supports us, and it's worked out very, very well. So.
We have a long, Massachusetts kind of has a reputation as this, this bastion of progressive liberal thought, et cetera. And you get that, and you really get that when you're in the military. When you travel about, they have this association, and it's the source of a lot of back and forth we have. But I'm not sure people know the depth of how much we support the men and women who put on their uniform. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But there's a lot of things that are unique to Massachusetts that you just pointed out, sir, that I think a lot of states, like you just said, southern states and beyond, would look at and say, "Wow,
right,
that's interesting and fascinating." And it just triggered my memory, sir. Another thing we do is that, correct me if I'm wrong, there are various memorandums of understandings, I believe, that you have. You're also involved in some of the counter-narcotic stuff, right, in conjunction with the district attorney's office. And I just think that's really important right now, especially, we're in recovery month right now. Yesterday was National Overdose Awareness Day. People continue to die all the time. And I don't think, again, people listening to this and watching this might think that the Massachusetts National Guard has a role that they play in helping kind of ferret out narcotics.
Yeah, very much so. It's a lot of people don't understand. There is an Assistant Secretary for Defense for counter-narcotics and terrorism. And under that Assistant Secretary is the Massachusetts National Guard, or the National Guard Bureau Counter-Drug Program. And here in Massachusetts, what we do is, for many years, helicopters were used to focus on marijuana growing. Well, that's long gone by. Now we are actually doing a bunch of different things to focus on the drugs, the man-made chemicals that are killing, really wiping out the next generation.
Absolutely.
So what we do is we've got around 16 analysts that are embedded with different law enforcement agencies, DEAs, the DEA, United States Postal Service, Mass State Police, district attorneys' offices. And what our folks do there is we took a lot of the young soldiers and airmen that have deployed throughout Afghanistan and were intel officers or signal folks, and they kind of learned how to track, different Taliban movements and stuff. And we've actually put them on active duty, and day to day they are actually in these agencies tracking the money, following the money and helping to alleviate and let some of the law enforcement agents and officers to get out there and actually kind of work the streets. On top of that, what we do is we also still use our Lakota helicopters. We're in the air, and we actually augment and help the law enforcement agencies with either tracking a vehicle, or we'll actually be 2 miles away filming a buy that allows the law enforcement agency to turn it over to a prosecutor and help build the case. The other thing we have is I think we are only one of 4 states that runs what's called the Top Gun program. And we're starting this year's September 19th, I believe. What the Top Gun program does is it takes roughly 25 law enforcement officers from across the Commonwealth and 25 district attorneys. And for a week, they go down to Joint Base Cape Cod. They're run through a scenario, and it culminates with a big exercise where they work through a buy and arrest and actually bringing the individual in front of the justice system. The interesting thing is the police officers and the DAs or ADAs, they switch roles.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So they get to learn, the challenges each face and what's needed to kind of make sure you build a good case and preserve the evidence to prosecute properly. So we run that once a year. It's a great program. And like I said, I think we're one of maybe 3 or 4 now that does that throughout the country.
That is that switching of the roles, the DAs being the law enforcement and vice versa. It's the police that gather the evidence, that investigate, and the prosecutors who obviously prosecute the case. And a lot of times when they run into challenges, if you will, it's because one of them makes a mistake that probably could have been prevented if they knew what the other side did a little bit better. So I think that is...
And it's a great, John, it's a great joint program. It's, the Mass State Police are really the lead on it. The District Attorneys Association have all bought into it. And the counter-drug plan that we run every year, it's got to be signed by the governor, it's got to be signed by the Attorney General, and they both sign it and endorse the program every year. And it's really made a difference.
Unbelievable. Sir, switching gears a little bit, I was reading a report the other day. These are things that I follow closely, A, being in, but B, being the chairman here in Massachusetts on the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee. We've got a problem in that recruiting nationally is down to post-Vietnam levels.
Right.
And that has so many implications that could take hours, beyond the scope of this show. Certainly national security, our ability to fight and win wars, and all that. A couple things. What do you attribute that to, and has it affected the Mass National Guard?
Yeah, it's affected everybody. It's interesting. When we were doing COVID missions, our recruiting went up. And I think a lot of it had to do with this generation of young men and women. They're all about volunteerism. They do a great job volunteering. I think the young men and women in the Commonwealth who saw what we were doing throughout the Commonwealth and the fact that we were in a lot of their hometowns, I think that kind of pushed them to want to join the National Guard. But as you look across the country at the military services and the components, yeah, you're right. Recruiting is way down. And I think a lot of that is this generation hasn't really had to face an enemy, right? Hasn't had a 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor where they've been threatened and challenged. And I think that is what's causing a lot of it. We're not even sure. You look out there and you wonder, hey, what is going to happen? Who do we need to be afraid of? And I mean, for a while there, we weren't even allowed to call our enemies enemies, right? They had to be called near-peer competitors. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think I'm pretty positive. Like I said, this young generation, they've got good hearts and they want to do the right thing. And they've had some other challenges that I didn't have as a kid. Like I never had to sit through a pandemic, right? But growing up, coming out of, I'm the last, I think, of the baby boomer years. But growing up, Vietnam was going on. And then, we saw what happened in Iraq. We saw what happened on September 11th. This generation now was not even alive when 9/11 happened. So I think part of that needs to be addressed. I also, honestly, I think we need to take a hard look at the draft. I mean, I've got females, soldiers serving in every area that I have for combat arms. But and we've had females, you have females going through Ranger School and Marine Corps Recon and on submarines. But we're still not really taking a hard look at having females register for the draft. No one wants to approach that. So not that we're going to be looking to draft anyone, but it's something that, for some reason we just kind of turn away from. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that as a nation, we haven't really had a threat lately. There's a threat coming, but it hasn't really impacted anyone to where they've sat down and thought, oh, my God, my way of life is in jeopardy right now, and what can I do to kind of make sure that we preserve the American way of life? And I think that's what has a lot to do with it.
I think you're right, sir, and there's a lot to unpack with what you just said, but you certainly know this far more than I do. But I have participated in various meetings, we'll say, briefings, we'll say, where as well as better than I know that America right now today is being challenged, whether it's cyber, whether it's sea, space, whatever, arguably more than we ever had in this world. But it's something that I think probably to most viewers and most, well, I guess we'll say lay people, if you will, and I'm certainly not using that in a pejorative sense, you just don't see.
Right.
You have to look really, really hard to see what's going on in the, I guess an example would be something like the South China Sea, to see how, our naval frigates are challenged on a pretty daily basis, our air assets challenged on a daily basis. But I think you're onto something. I think it's, and I just, there hasn't been a 9/11, thank God. There hasn't been a Pearl Harbor. But one of the unintended consequence of this as well is that, and this is another area where I spend way too much time studying and researching, it's this growing military-civilian divide, if you will. And, right now, here in America, right, it's the last stat was a little bit less than 0.5% of the country is serving. So if you don't have a draft, we haven't since '73, it's an all-volunteer force. There are multiple, you're not going to find many service members, well, certainly not today because we haven't had as many conflicts. But over the past, say, 20 years, you're not going to find many service members who have one deployment. It's repeat deployments over and over again. So it's not a lot of people doing a lot of things for the rest. So I think one of the things that happens is that a lot of times military families tend to be just that, military families.
Sure.
There's just not, I don't know how to say this and be tactful about it, but I don't know if everybody has a stake in the outcome when it's not their family member, when it's not their cousin, when it's not their brother, when we know with absolute certainty that they most certainly do have a stake in the outcome. But a lot of times you don't see it until something really, really bad happens. And I think that's unfortunate. And we need to do a better job, I think, selling the virtues of service to country. Because I think the organization that you lead, the Massachusetts National Guard, and I want to use this as a segue into some of the things we're trying to combat, how we're trying to combat this at the state level, like what we just did with the passage of the SPEED Act. Now, sir, I know because you provided the quote, it's been in there, you were of the opinion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the SPEED Act for the past 100 years is the most pro-veteran and veterans family member and guard bill that we've passed in Massachusetts. That's a bold, broad statement.
Definitely. If you go back and look and just focus on the microcosm that is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if you go back and look after post-World War I, right, when the soldiers came back, they were treated and provided for, and really the Commonwealth did a great job showing their appreciation when at the time, these young men kind of boarded the boats and went over to fight in the Great War. When they came back, they were the ones that actually started laying the groundwork. They went to work and started really kind of continue to build America. Honestly, as you know, so fast. Then we started entering into the Great Depression. Same thing happened in World War II. You know, at this time now, the sons of those that fought the Great War had gone over and came back. When both these came back, but really more so when I said the 100 years is really after World War I. That was when the Commonwealth, especially for the Massachusetts National Guard, the Yankee Division, if you will, that was made up of all the New England states, when they came back, Massachusetts and all the New England states rolled out the red carpet and actually, what can we do to kind of show you how much we appreciate you going over and fighting the Great War. And if you keep in mind, a lot of those men that went over were really first generation. Some of them had come over and then gone back. They weren't the first generation of born Americans from Southern Europe, but they were, they had left their homes, come here, and then gone back to fight. So this bill, the SPEED Act bill, I honestly think if you go back and look, it is the most monumental bill that we've seen in 100 years, not just for the Massachusetts National Guard, but for the focus, I think, on veterans and families, and a lot of different ways for families as well. But yeah, you and I had talked. I mean, there is a lot of great things in there. When we focus on it, like the SPEED Act, a lot of people, I don't think, understand licensure reciprocity, right? Or the headache of, if you're moving to Massachusetts because you've been reassigned as a member of the military, the headache of trying to get your young son or daughter into a school system mid-year and what that entitles. So, like you said, when we started talking about the SPEED Act, and it was really it was really a great example of, hey, how do we take care of the whole that is the military? How do we take care of the Massachusetts National Guard? How do we take care of the active duty man or woman that's coming to Natick Soldier System Center or on the Constitution or at Anscombe Air Force Base? So like I said, the SPEED Act, license reciprocity, I don't know if a lot of people know. If you are married and you come to Massachusetts, and let's say your spouse is a lawyer, a hairdresser, a barber, an undertaker, something that requires licensure. We did not have it in Massachusetts, that if you got that license in California or Virginia, we never approved that license to come and be reciprocal and allow you to continue your career here in Massachusetts. And that's what the SPEED Act focused on. I talked a little bit about the purple school system and some of the things that come with that, just a headache of being reassigned, moving, and most active duty permanent change of stations and moves happen in June and July. So By the time a family gets settled, and if you're lucky, you get your kid enrolled in a school system long enough, but a lot of times it just doesn't happen. Just a headache of trying to get your son or daughter get their school records to be accepted and allow them to continue on at the grade they're at. So that was really the genesis. And then if you want to talk about some of the other ones that went in there, it was huge. I mean, we looked at here's another. Well, everything was going on in D.C. and the VFW, and I know a lot of our VSOs that are affiliated with the VFW went down and pushed for burn pit issues.
The PACT Act, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a hard fight to get that over the line in D.C. Massachusetts already had the burn pit register ready to go, and that was part of the Speed Act bill as well. So Massachusetts was ahead of the federal side on that bill. The Medal of Fidelity. We've been talking years, Massachusetts has the Medal of Liberty, which is the equivalent of the Purple Heart being awarded posthumously for servicemen and women who die in the line of duty. But for years, we talked about, hey, man, we're losing soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, Coast Guardsmen rapidly, a lot of them coming out of Korea and Vietnam from service-related diseases and sickness, Agent Orange, cancers. So we talked for probably 2 years, and we created this. It's called the Medal of Fidelity that specifically focuses on death from service-related diseases. You see the commercials about mesothelioma for blue water sailors. I mean, Camp Lejeune water. Pilots that are flying are getting, especially fighter pilots, are getting a lot of cancer in their lower extremities because that's where the radar sits. And what's one that's affecting everybody is, post-traumatic stress disorders that, are attributed to combat action and are leading to suicides. So that bill was passed as well. That was a bill that the governor really pushed. It's a great example of both sides, the Senate and the House have been fantastic on this thing, working with the governor on getting that over the line as well. We also had, for us, we hope it's going to help. For the last 2 years in the reserve component, be it the Guard or the Reserve, the employers have been carrying the weight of what's been going on.
Absolutely.
And so part of what else was in the Speed Act bill was the $2,000 tax deduction for small businesses in the Commonwealth that hire guardsmen. So if you hire 6 guardsmen, you get up to $2,000 per guardsman. So it'll be $12,000. And what that allows me to do, it keeps guardsmen in the Commonwealth, and it keeps employers supporting them when I have to pull them in for either a domestic mission or if they've got to head overseas right now. I will tell you, one was a kind of a simple one, but you're an Army officer, soldier. I'm an airman. I love the Navy. I love the Marine Corps. But every year it kind of bothered us that it was automatically in state law that the Marine Corps and the Navy birthday were always celebrated and honored. But the Army, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and even the Merchant Marines, who actually did a great job, we actually had to kind of push and approach our state senators and our reps. Hey, can you just get a proclamation that recognizes the birthday of the National Guard or the Army? So that's what this bill does as well. It codifies that along the same level, which is it should have been done a long time ago.
Sir, when you brought that to me, I have to be honest. When you brought that to me, it was really just the Navy and the Marine Corps. And just to be clear, we all have nothing but love for our brothers and sisters in the Navy and the Marine Corps. It was comical. I was laughing about it. So it was a much needed fix that we got done. As we say, one team, one fight.
Right. Our all-time biggest one, John, and you and I talked about this for us, was the Massachusetts National Guard Family Education Act.
Absolutely.
And that was, and for folks that aren't out there, what this bill does is if you join the Massachusetts National Guard, you get tuition and fees at any state college or university for free. But what we're seeing is a lot of our soldiers and airmen aren't going to college. They've either gone into the trades or they're doing other things, but they're worrying about their kids and the cost of colleges. What this bill does is if you are a member of the Massachusetts National Guard and you enlist for a second term up to a minimum of 6 years. So if you go from your first 6 years, you re-enlist, go from 6 to 12. At that time, if you don't use your 130 credit hours or whatever you have left over, if you use them, you can then transfer them to your spouse or your kids who will be able to keep them even after you retire up to age 26. So that's huge. I mean, this is the next generation that is going to benefit from the service of men and women who want to join the Massachusetts National Guard. That is a home run and something that, as we look at it, it's not just for college. It's also for men and women. We've got a great relationship with the trades.
That was a huge
You
part
know,
of it.
and we've got folks that don't, they missed the boat to come into a place like Westfield Tech, right? But now they get out of college and they get out of high school and they're trying to figure out how can I become a tradesman. This allows them to use that as well. So we can actually modify, because the way we wrote the bill, it allows us to kind of make the decision as to where it can be used.
And to your point, sir, that's a workforce development thing, because one of the things that we looked at with this legislation is that some of the money that was out there in various states and various jurisdictions, it would actually say, for college, and it would rule out the trades.
Right.
And all of the data that we're seeing from a workforce development standpoint is that you can't do that. We need to be encouraging people to come, as we sit here in Westfield Technical Academy filming this, to go down this path. But the other thing too, sir, and correct me if I'm wrong, and just to even rewind it a little bit further, one of the things that we heard a lot from DOD, from the Air Force, from everybody is that, and I just want to bring back the licensure piece of the SPEED Act again, and then the education piece. And I think it's really important for people to look at those bills in the context of what's happening with people not signing up for the military, right? Their recruitment that we just spoke to, how it's essentially imploding, if you will, to, again, post-Vietnam levels. There was some survey that DOD brought to our attention, and it was to military spouses, and it was, what are the two issues that would encourage you to get out of the military? And it was, well, one, if the spouse if we get transferred as a family and the spouse has a job that requires a license, how long is it going to take the military spouse to have that state that they're going to have that license approved?
Right.
Because if you don't approve it in a timely fashion, in essence, what you're doing is you're turning a 2-income family into a 1-income family. And if it takes months and months and months, and the average active duty stay or the average transfer is 2 years before they're gone again, 2-income to 1-income family. And then the education piece. That was the other thing. I think education was actually one. When families get together, I want to know when I go to my new duty station, is my son or daughter going to be okay at that new school? And a big part of that was that when they transfer, those military orders come in, if they miss the boat, if you will, if it's the middle of the school year, they're going to have to stay back.
Yeah.
They're going to have to stay back. And they said, we will absolutely get out of the military. And that's tied to national. If we have people leaving because of that, that's a national security issue, that's a recruitment issue, that's a retention issue. That's our ability to fight and win wars in the future if our force continues to dwindle, as you know. So just so the viewers know, what we did with the education piece first is we said, okay, so in Massachusetts, we've got this quirk in our law that you can only register in a school district once you are physically present in that district, in the Commonwealth. We said that as soon as you get orders that you are transferring, and for the viewers, the orders are the formal documents, if you don't know this, the formal documents that say you are going from Camp Pendleton in California to Fort Devens, and I'm just coming up with an example. You can register your child for school right when you get those orders, and it allows you, if the transfer is going to happen at a later point in time in the middle of a school year where you run the risk of staying back, having your child stay back, you can participate in one of Massachusetts' virtual schools. Right. So right when you get here, you can just continue on with your classmates. And then again, the employer piece, huge. Another thing that I think is going to enable Massachusetts to lead and say, "Hey, come to us." And it could have the impact of increasing recruitment again.
Yeah, this bill propels Massachusetts out of the 54 states, territories, and District of Columbia that all have National Guard. This bill that the House, the Senate got over the line propels Massachusetts to number one when it comes to benefits and support of its National Guard and its veterans and families. It's interesting. I had breakfast with the Chief National Guard Bureau, Dan Hokinson, about 2 weeks ago, and I was explaining to him the bill and the SPEED Act, and I was talking about this stuff, and he said, "Hey, can you send me copies of that bill so I can take a look at it and kind of see what other states and push other states?" And I told him, yeah, I'll send it to you. Well, I'm not sending it to him till we get our numbers full. Then I'll send it to him.
Hey man, that's awesome. And then, sir, what I would just say is that it was a perfect example of what I think was good government, right? There was collaboration. It was, you weighing in on the Guard perspective.
Right.
There was the Department of Defense on the Pentagon side. There was myself and others on the Senate side, Chair McMurtry and others on the House side. It was just collaboration at its finest, getting to a point. And I think we got it right. One of the things I'll say, and then I want to move on, is that most bills that we file, most bills that we pass, the governor, whether it's Governor Baker or any predecessors and governors into the future, they take a pretty significant, not significant, but they look at it, they have the 10 days to look at it, and sometimes there's a veto, sometimes there's an amendment, sometimes there's a language change. This was I don't know if it was the fastest, but I remember we passed this, and then a phone call came in from DVS. It was, hey, the governor's signing this bill.
Yeah, from the time you guys it was August 5th when you signed it. Yeah, and you're right. Massachusetts, the Beacon Hill area, it's really an example. Regardless there's an R or D next to your name, or if you're the governor, you're in the Senate or the House, you all get together and really look out, especially for us in the military and veterans. You work together and do what's best for the soldier, the airman, the service member, their family, the Gold Star families and veterans. And you do that on a lot of other stuff as well. It's I do brag on that. It's really a great example. It's something I'd like to see a little bit more down in D.C. I think we all would like to see it a little bit more.
We always say it. We'd love to see the feds take a page out of our book in terms of how we do things. Sir, quickly, changing gears. There's a lot in the media we're hearing about, F-35s, F-15EXs, and where we sit right now, we're only about a mile down the road from Barnes, the home of the 104th Fighter Wing, who we are so incredibly proud of, their mission set, what they do. And I have to tell you, the other day there was the 104th put on something at a school here in Westfield, and it was kind of just an explanation of this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, and we're here to answer any questions. And I remember leaving that saying to myself, that's just a great job. That's reaching out to the community. I mean, just like there's town-gown relationships between a college or university and the people that live in the community, obviously that applies to a military installation as well. And I just remember saying to myself, kudos to the Guard, specifically the 104th in that example, for opening up, being there, answering any questions. And I thought that was really, really, really cool and impressive that they did that. But my gut tells me there's a lot of, in fact, when I was there, and I'm in the military, but my gut tells me there's a lot of folks listening that might not know the difference between the F-35, the F-15EX, what they have up there right now. Sir, could you just give us a real basic explanation of what's in play here?
Sure, and thanks for the compliment. The environmental impact study that started that. The new wing commander, Dave Moonhalassi-Kuhn, is just a great guy, a very smart guy, and he put his team together to kind of make sure that we are getting the information out. As soon as we get it. One thing I always try to remind people about is, hey, the thing about the Guard is we're your neighbors. We live in your community. There's a problem, we want to be aware of it, and we want to address it. As you look at these airplanes, and especially for me, the 104th Fighter Wing is, I tell people, for 4 generations of Keefe, the 104th Fighter Wing, and put food on our table. My dad joined at 56 with my uncle. Their mother, she was a widower, but she had polio, so they joined 56. Me and my brothers grew up there. My brother Jim was a wing commander out there. I was out there. And then, my kids now, everything they had is because I was at the 104th and I was a member of the Guard. I still live in Western Mass, like you. I drive that Pike every day and come back, and because I just love being in Western Mass. So, yeah, we're hoping to get a new airplane. We are going to get a new airplane. Because, be honest with you, it's between the F-15X and the F-35. I will tell you, we're in a position here at Barnes that you've got probably 50 other states, territories in the district that are envious of, because we've been told you're either going to get the new F-15X or you're going to get a new F-35. Difference is, we went from, I remember in 2005 when BRAC hit, we lost the A-10s.
Sir, just for the viewers, what's BRAC?
Base realignment and closure. So that's when they go ahead and they look at all the bases, military bases across the country, and they want to cut costs, so they closed bases. What happened in 2005 is BRAC didn't just focus on bases. Because, to be honest with you, out at Barnes is the example the National Guard Bureau always uses as this is what we want our bases to be like. On municipal airports, in the community, working together to keep a commercial airport open, but also having a fighter force or an air mobility command force there. What happened in 2005 is they took BRAC, and then we started hearing the term transformation. And I was out at the 104th at the time. So what happened with transformation? They also used it as a opportunity to transform the Air Force, which meant get smaller. So Barnes lost its A-10s, and we were told we're going to get the F-15s from Otis, and Otis had lost their F-15s. So a lot of folks, we went through this. We had to do an environmental impact study for the F-15 because there was a bit of a noise signature difference listening to, you grew up around here, the A-10 had that high-pitched whine noise, and then, the F-15, when they're kicking off, responding to an alert someplace, an afterburner, it's noisy. It reminds me as a kid, when I grew up, the F-100s were out at Barnes, and we could hear them. So now we're going to go through the same thing, going from the F-15C to either an F-15X or an F-35. The F-15X, the model we're looking at, it's an air-to-air platform weapon system. It's there. It's got, I think, 12 stores that you can put missiles and rockets on. Its job is to take out other aircraft or missiles. And one of the big threats right now, if you do any reading on the Department of Defense and threats, hypersonic weapons, cruise missiles coming from other areas. The focus is no longer really here in the homeland on violent extremist organizations. We're looking at near-peer enemies that would actually launch hypersonics. The F-15X is great for that. It's got a big radar. It can pick up these threats far, far off, and it's got 12 different areas that it can launch missiles to destroy it and protect the homeland. Keep in mind the number one, the priority is protection of the homeland, both the national defense strategy and national military strategy. So that plays a huge role in that. The F-35, it's a program of record. It's a 50-year weapon system. It's a multi-role fighter. It can do some air-to-air. It can also do air-to-ground, close air support, and protect the troops on the ground. We've been an air combat alert F-15 unit since the F-15 arrived here in 2008. With the F-35, really what the National Guard and the Air Force likes about that is we can be out of Barnes, we can be up in the Arctic, or we can be in Europe in 6 hours with those airplanes to protect against a potential Russian threat, a Chinese threat up in the Arctic, because everything is being contested now. So we're looking at both those. It's interesting, a lot of the F-15 pilots and mechanics are very, very loyal to the F-15 aircraft. So you got a lot of the men and women over there that they want to stay in the F-15. You got a lot of the younger kids who been trained since day one on jointness, right? And it's a joint strike fighter. So they kind of want to push for the F-35, the younger folks, and kind of get back into a multi-role thing. So it's even the senior staff, we sit there and debate with each other. I'll be honest, I was, from day one, I wanted an F-35. Like I said, my days go back to Barnes when we were, a close air support unit. I'd like to see Barnes get back to that. But at the time, some of the leaders that were F-15 pilots wanted the F-15X. So we're going to find out, I would imagine, within the next 6 weeks, which one we're going to get. And I cannot stress enough, the reason we are actually being looked at is because of the combination of support we get from, number one, from the community. Not just Westfield. We know how proud Westfield is of having Barnes. You got the Starfires, and we know how much Westfield loves Barnes, and we love being in Westfield. But the surrounding whole Western Mass area, and then on top of that, our state legislatures, our governor, and then honestly, Richie Neal, Senator Elizabeth Warren, really spearheaded a multi-congressional delegate meeting about a month ago where they brought Secretary Kendall in, and I think there was 8 of them. They sat and they peppered him on multiple questions, mostly focusing on Barnes and focusing on Westover as well. So it's been a great push, and the reason we're there and where we are is because of that one team, one fight effort that's kind of been put together.
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to the collaboration, right? There was the federal level, right, having that meeting from a month ago, and going back to the beginning of the legislative session, and I probably should have brought this up when we were talking about the Speed Act and other things. You know, the DOD made it abundantly clear to us that we are watching you in Massachusetts about how you're going to treat your military family members. And one of the decisions that was made, as you know, was we're not just going to look at who is a pro-service member state anymore. We're now going to take in families into that, and we're going to take that into account when we make decisions.
That's a huge point, John. You're right, because the Air Force has a scorecard.
Absolutely.
And they grade, like you said, they grade schools, they grade community support. And you're right. You know, the Speed Act that's what got the focus on it for, you know, license reciprocity, and that elevated our scorecard.
Absolutely.
When we started down this road, when I became Adjutant General in 2016, we knew the F-15 was going to be kind of put to rest, but there was no follow-on aircraft for it. There was no follow-on plan for it. And then we started kind of kicking around with my senior team and some other advisors. Hey, let's go ahead. Let's see if we can get the F-35. But once we got the state legislature involved to kind of address license reciprocity, school systems. I mean, there was at one time they were trying to tell us, the scorecard was trying to tell us that Louisiana had better school systems than Massachusetts. And come on, you know, nothing against my friends in Louisiana, but no way. Massachusetts is known as, this is a place people want to come to, and not just military people. People come to Massachusetts for the education, the high tech, 4 seasons a year, and the fact that there's a lot you can do. And so when we saw that, we actually, the Department of Education worked with us as well. We went back and got all our schools, specifically in the Western Mass area that surround the Westfield area. We got them reevaluated, and our scorecard went up even higher. So, yeah, a lot of work. Like I said, it was a collaboration of
On all levels.
National Guard leadership, state legislature, and congressional delegates that pushing the information that we would send up. And I will tell you, you know, like you said, the governor alone met with three actual secretaries of the Air Force and one acting secretary of the Air Force to continue to kind of push the fact that Barnes needs a follow-on airplane. It brings in, you know, Barnes brings in, last I think I read, $239 million a year into the economy in Western Mass.
Statewide, it's a great point. Statewide, the installations contribute $12.3 billion, and it's either 56, somewhere between 56 and 57,000 jobs.
Right.
So as I was kind of having this debate internally with my colleagues, it was, you know, you can make this case, we need to do this legislation for reasons having absolutely nothing to do with our military. Just the economy. You know, you take a $12.3 billion hit to your state's GDP and that many people. I mean, I always tell people, if you have a question, go up to the Dunkin' Donuts around Barnes, go to the local sandwich shops, so there's all that other contribution to the economy as well that these installations. Last question, sir, then I want to wrap up. Just to be clear, on the 35 versus the 15EX, both of them for years ahead into the future, as a nation and if you're looking at it from a U.S. military capabilities, we need both of them, correct?
Sure, you need both right now. You know, the F-35 is it's called the 5th generation fighter. It's programmed to be in the weapon system for the next in the inventory for the next 50 years. The F-15X, it's not really a 5th gen. It's what we call a 4.5. So it doesn't have really the stealth technology, but it's got some other great stuff. That aircraft will probably be around for like the next 20 years or so. While those two aircraft are flying around, the Air Force is already kind of looking at the 6th generation fighter, which is called the NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance Fighter. And they are actually looking at prototypes and developing that. So a lot of when you hear about the Air Force getting smaller, a lot of that money they're looking to recap will be invested in that 6th generation fighter. But I'm not sure the Chinese and the Russians are going to wait for us to have that fighter. So,
Sir, I just want to finish up by saying that over the past few years, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to work with you. Looking forward, you know, it's our hope that you're going to stay on. We're going to do everything we can. You've just been phenomenal as a leader for the men and women of the Massachusetts National Guard. You've been great. It's an honor to work with you, and thank you so much for coming on today.
And John, thanks for everything you do. Like I said, you and I talk constantly. If I need something, I pick the phone up, and you're always there for me. So I appreciate it. You know, I'm blessed to be surrounded by a very, very bright team. I come up with what they call, general officer wacky ideas, and they make them happen. So thanks so much, and thanks for the support, and thanks for your service, John.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you very
you.
much. Thanks
Take
for
care.
joining us today.